Hi, I'm Alex Berninger. I'm the Senior Manager of Intel. And today we're going to do a roundup of all of our birds. Birds are what Red Canary uses to cluster threat activity and to describe that clustered threat activity. And so just like our name, Red Canary, we use a color and a bird. So amber albatross is an example, and all of our birds follow that same theme. And this really allows our team to be able to talk about the activity that we're seeing across multiple customer environments in a way that makes sense and is transparent and uses analytic rigor.
Tangerine Turkey is one of our newer threats. It is a threat that's spread via infected USB drives. We're not sure about the initial infection vector, but we think it might be related to potentially print shops and infected endpoints in print shops, then spread it onto USBs. Over its course of activity, so over its execution chain, goes on to ultimately download a cryptocurrency miner. So XMRig, which is a very common one. There's a lot of great detection analytics out there for XMRig if you want to keep an eye out for this activity. And it's also gone on to potentially mine Zephyr coin, which is kind of interesting. That's a newer cryptocurrency that we have not seen as much of.
Amber Albatross is an activity cluster that we track that is usually delivered via a potentially unwanted program or PUP, like PC App Store or Let's Compress. This activity cluster eventually leads to a Pi or more obfuscated Pi installer with Stealer-like capabilities. Amber Albatross is heavily obfuscated, and so we don't actually know what it eventually leads to, but it does initially perform reconnaissance. It's really similar to what we see with other stealers. One of the best ways to prevent threats like Amber Albatross is to restrict third-party app stores from running within your environment, like PC App Store.
Saffron Starling is a chain of activity that we've seen quite a bit. Usually it occurs somewhere around tax time when everybody's using their financial statements. The threat usually comes in as an email zip file where people will see, they think it's a Chase Bank statement, some sort of statement related to their bank. They go and they double click on the script within, and then it kicks off to deploy additional payloads such as Danabot or Modern-Bucus. The really interesting thing is it also brings a little bit of eye candy with it so that you don't suspect that something is wrong. It really matters for defenders because this is a really quick and simple way for adversaries to deploy some really potentially devastating malware. When I think about how we can fight back against Saffron Starling, how we can take some steps against it, the number one thing that comes to mind for me is trying to change the default file handler in Windows for JavaScript files to be Notepad instead of the default WScript process. So by default in Windows, JavaScript files will always execute with WScript. That is what happens when you double click that file and it runs.
Scarlet Goldfinch is an activity cluster that Red Canary started tracking in June 2023, and it leverages the fake browser update scam. And so basically, when a user navigates to a malicious website, then it will prompt that visitor that they need to update their browser. And instead of updating the browser, the threat actually delivers a malicious JavaScript file. The activity chain for Scarlet Goldfinch eventually leads to Net Support Manager. And this is really important to keep in mind because although Net Support Manager is a remote monitoring and management tool that can be used legitimately, it essentially gives the adversary a backdoor into the endpoint and into the victim's environment. One of the best ways to mitigate the risk of Scarlet Goldfinch or some of the other threats that use this fake browser update scam like SocGholish is to have JavaScript files open in something benign like Notepad instead of executing automatically.
Lilac Lyrebird is another one of our color birds that we have been tracking for a while. It's not as common as some of our other birds are. The way that Lilac Lyrebird works is it's spread using search engine optimization poisoning, SEO poisoning, to trick users into downloading what they think is a legitimate version of LogMeIn, which is tech support help software. So they'll use the search engine optimization poisoning. Users will download the not legitimate version of LogMeIn, and then the Lilac Lyrebird actors will step in and gain access to systems using their version of the LogMeIn software.
Charcoal Stork is a suspected pay-per-install provider that uses Malvertising to deliver malicious installers, often masquerading as cracked games or desktop wallpaper or things like that. Charcoal Stork can deliver a lot of different payloads, and it has been observed delivering payloads like Chrome Loader or Smashjacker, which are browser hijackers, as well as things that are a little bit more concerning, like VileRat. One of the best ways to defend against threats like Charcoal Stork is to utilize an ad blocker if you can within your environment.
Silver Toucan is an activity cluster that was relevant for macOS threats. This was kind of a odd little cluster of monetization activity that would go on to help in the deployment of additional advertising fraud malware called AdLoad. So in the case of Silver Toucan, we would see a lot of curl activity. We would see a lot of different things like those that would download macOS software and then put it onto the system. I think it's really relevant because people tend not to think about macOS as being a very hot commodity, very hot target for criminals. They tend not to think about that exposure in their organization. Really, it's time for us to start treating those macOS systems as we would Windows endpoints. Let's put malware protection on those endpoints. Let's put our EDR sensors, let's put everything else on there that we would normally do for any other standard system, and let's make sure that we can manage those the same way we manage our Windows systems.
Raspberry Robin is a set of activity that we've been tracking for a few years now. It's spread via USB drives, infected USB drives. There are other ways that it's spread as well, but that's still what we primarily see here at Red Canary. It goes on to reach out to external resources, typically compromised QNAP devices, and it pulls down additional malware. So it's got this DLL that it can pull down that can deploy additional payloads. It's also been seen deploying other pieces of malware that are in our top 10. So for example, SocGholish. Since it's distributed via infected USB drives, you might want to consider a USB device policy if you haven't done so already. And that can be one way of at least mitigating that particular vector for Raspberry Robin infections.
Mango Parakeet is another one of our activity clusters that is delivered via a USB flash drive. We track this activity by their subtle masquerading and renaming of common system programs like SVC host and WScript, and the use of very rudimentary obfuscation techniques like adding more spaces between the malicious executable's name and the extension. So why does Mango Parakeet matter? Well, it is often delivering malicious worms via USB flash drives. And really to defend against this, similar to our other USB type of threats like Raspberry Robin, consider putting a USB policy in place within your environment.
Yellow Cockatoo is a Windows threat that is this neat little Stealer remote access combo tool that's developed in .NET languages. And as we've seen it over the years evolve a little bit, it would get deployed with from weird forum postings where people would go and search for legal documents or accounting documents, things like those, contract language. and they would end up downloading malware instead of getting the document that they came for. For mitigating and trying to work back against threats like Yellow Cockatoo, including the threat itself, we want to provide users safe spaces to be able to go and get their software, go and get their documents. We want to have a place where users don't necessarily have to go and Google for what they want and potentially find, malicious advertisements, fake forum postings, things like those. If you are an accounting organization, if you're a bank, if you're a legal organization, let's have a library of documents that users can go find. Let's make sure that they can have something where they can retrieve that information in a safe fashion. Let's have somewhere they can get their software in a safe fashion so they don't have to venture out into untold parts of the internet to go find them.